The fleet has arrived. Battle is joined. Engage all targets. For humanity.
The princess's decree. Only a human can be my future husband. The War Council chamber was already shouting when Princess Lyra of the Vialthari Empire slammed her palm on the obsidian table and said it out loud for the first time. I will marry a human, or I will marry no one. The room went silent, the way a room goes silent after something explodes.
Hello guys, how are you? Hope you're doing well. If you love sci-fi stories, so don't forget to like, comment, share this video. Enjoy the video.
Chancellor Drev, whose 4 arms had been gesturing at star maps a half-second earlier, let all 4 of them fall. Admiral Soren of the Silver Fleet stopped mid-sentence. Even the Imperial Scribe, a creature who had recorded wars and treaties and the deaths of emperors without blinking, looked up from his tablet. Lyra was 24 years old, heir to the oldest throne in the Outer Spiral, commander of 13 fleets, daughter of an emperor who had made 3 galaxies kneel. She stood 5'9" by human measurement, her silver-white hair braided tight, her black eyes holding every man in the room the way a locked door holds a desperate man. The decree stands, she said. Record it. The scribe recorded it. What followed was not a discussion. It was a controlled panic. The Vialthari Empire had existed for 9,000 years. In that time, the Imperial line had married within 4 approved species. The humans of the Terran Federation had been a known species for exactly 41 years, since first contact at the fringe of the Oran Belt. They were short-lived, strange, dangerously creative, occasionally irrational, and utterly fascinating to anyone who studied them for more than a week. They were also, by every measure the Empire used, a minor species. Young, rough-edged, without a seat on the Galactic Council, without a noble bloodline that traced back more than a few centuries at most. No Velthari of royal blood had ever even sat in the same room as one. Lyra had studied them for 6 years in secret, had read every field report, every anthropological study, every contact log from the border stations, had watched footage of human soldiers in combat, human diplomats in negotiation, human engineers rebuilding a colony ship in open vacuum with improvised tools and a vocabulary that apparently involved a great deal of creative language. She had not made this decision in a week. She had made it the day she watched a single human medic, cut off from backup on the surface of Kalos 7, hold a defensive line against a Vialthari mercenary squad for 11 hours, using nothing but a collapsed comm tower, a medical kit, and what the field report described as an unreasonable amount of determination. The medic's name was Lieutenant Cole Navarro. He had survived. The report noted he had then asked if there was coffee. Lyra had read that report 4 times. The Council's objections came in waves. Chancellor Drev went first, leading with protocol and bloodline law. Admiral Soren followed with geopolitical consequences, specifically what the 4 noble houses would do when they heard. The High Priest of the Valthari Accord raised his 3-fingered hand and began a very long sentence about sacred tradition. Lyra let them finish. Then she stood up straighter, which she did not think was possible, and said, "The Empire has spent 41 years observing humanity from a careful distance. 41 years deciding they are not ready, not sophisticated enough, not ancient enough." She looked at Drev specifically. And in those 41 years, they went from atmospheric flight to deep space colonization. They survived the Kalos conflict, the Pretar siege, and the Murath plague with no outside assistance. They have done in 4 decades what most species take 4 centuries to achieve. They are also, said Soren, unpredictable. Yes, said Lyra, that is the point. The Council did not understand that answer. She did not explain it. Some things she had decided she would not explain. The decree went out across the Empire that evening. By the next morning, it had reached the border stations. By the end of the week, a courier drone was crossing the neutral zone toward Terran Federation space, carrying a formal message sealed with the imperial crest. The message was addressed to the Terran Federation's diplomatic office and outlined the following. The imperial princess was exercising her right of sovereign selection. She was formally requesting a human male, unmarried, between 25 and 35 years of age, of demonstrated merit and character, to be presented as a candidate for consideration. The Federation's diplomatic office read the message 3 times to make sure it was not a translation error. It was not a translation error. On Earth, in the Federation's Central Coordination Building in Chicago, a deputy secretary named Claire Voss put the message down on her desk and stared at the wall for a very long time. Then she picked up her comm and called Director Hayes. And when Hayes answered, Claire said, "Sir, I need you to read something, and I need you to read it calmly." Hayes read it. He was not calm. The message had not named a specific individual. It had asked for a candidate of merit, proven under pressure, capable of operating in an unfamiliar environment, with the kind of character that held when circumstances required it. Claire pulled every relevant service record in the Federation's military and diplomatic corps. She cross-referenced it with a handful of known Velthari contact logs, looking for any human who had already been observed by Velthari forces whose behavior had already been noted. One name appeared in 3 separate Velthari field reports, which was 2 more than any other human on the list. Lieutenant Cole Navarro, 28 years old, born in Albuquerque. Medic, combat rated. Currently posted to the border station Kalos 7 outpost, twice decorated. Known for operating without backup and asking for coffee afterward. Claire stared at his file photo for a moment. It was a standard military headshot. He looked like someone who had slept approximately well and had opinions about things. She flagged his file. Then she wrote a note at the top of it that said, "Does he know any Velthari customs?" and answered her own question immediately in the margin. No, obviously not. This is going to be a problem. She sent it up the chain anyway. 4 days later, Cole Navarro received orders that pulled him off Kalos 7 and assigned him to a diplomatic briefing in Chicago. The orders did not explain why. They never did. He packed his kit, told his unit's medic corporal to not let anyone die while he was gone, and caught the transport. He had no idea what was waiting. The Empire, meanwhile, was watching. 3 Velthari intelligence officers had been quietly repositioned to observation posts near the neutral zone the moment the decree went public. They were not there to interfere. They were there because the Empire had exactly one rule about watching the humans. Watch carefully. Lyra knew they were there. She had ordered it herself. She sat in her private study the night the courier's confirmation came back, confirming the Federation had received the decree, and she held a small data chip between her fingers. On it was the field report from Kalos 7, 11 hours. 1 man. No backup. She set the chip down on the desk. "Find me someone worth finding," she said to no one in particular. Somewhere across 2 star systems and a very confused diplomatic chain, Cole Navarro was on a transport eating a protein bar and wondering why Chicago. The Empire was 9,000 years old. It had never done anything like this before. That was, Lyra had decided, exactly the problem. The briefing room in Chicago smelled like recycled air and institutional coffee, and Cole Navarro had been sitting in it for 4 hours before anyone told him what was actually happening. He had been told it was a diplomatic assignment that had not been wrong, technically. Claire Voss sat across the table from him and put a printed copy of the decree down in front of him. She had printed it because she thought seeing it on paper might make it feel more real. It did not make it feel more real. Cole read it again, put it down. "The Velthari princess," he said. "Yes," said Claire, "who wants a human husband. That is what the decree says. And you flagged my file. You appear in 3 separate Velthari field observation reports. That is unusual. They do not typically document individual humans by name." Cole looked at the report summaries she had included. Kalo 7 was there, the 11 Hours, the collapsed tower, the mercenary squad. There were 2 others he had not known anyone was watching. A supply run through the Oran Fringe where he had talked to hostile contact down from a weapons escalation by offering the man his lunch. A border incident where a Vialthari scout vessel had been taking fire from pirates, and Cole, on a passing medical transport, had returned fire with a hull-mounted emergency flare launcher because it was the only thing available. The flare launcher incident, he said. They described it as, Claire checked her notes, resourceful application of available instruments under conditions of extreme disadvantage. I know what I described it as. We are choosing not to include your description in the diplomatic file. Cole leaned back in his chair. He was a lean man, not especially tall, with dark eyes that had the quality of someone who had made fast decisions in bad situations often enough that it had become a resting expression. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at Claire. What does this actually mean? He said, practically. Claire had prepared for this question. It means the Empire is formally inviting a human candidate to their imperial court for a period of assessment. The princess has the right of final decision. Nothing is binding on your end. The Federation views this as an opportunity for diplomatic contact at a level we have never had access to. What level is that? The throne room level. Cole was quiet for a moment. I'm a medic from Albuquerque, he said. We are aware. I don't speak Velthari. We have translators. And there are 16 hours of cultural briefing materials we need you to go through before the transport leaves. When does the transport leave? 72 hours. Cole looked at the decree again. He looked at the photo of Princess Lyra that Claire had included in the briefing packet, because she was a thorough person who believed in complete information. The princess was looking at something off-frame in the photo, her expression carrying the particular quality of someone who has already decided the thing they are looking at is insufficient. She looked like someone who had very specific standards. He looked like someone who had eaten a protein bar for dinner 4 nights in a row. This is the strangest thing that has ever happened to me, he said. It is possibly the strangest thing that has happened to anyone, said Claire. Are you in? Cole picked up the decree, set it back down. Yeah, he said, I'm in. Claire exhaled. She had not realized she was holding her breath. The cultural briefing began that evening. It lasted 14 hours. Cole took notes in a small paper notebook because he had always taken notes by hand. And the instructor, a xenoanthropologist named Dr. Pruitt, who had spent 12 years studying Velthari social structure, watched him do it and said nothing but made a small note of her own. He asked questions that were not on the standard list. He asked about what the Vialthari considered rude versus what they considered weak, because he understood those were not the same thing and that the difference mattered. He asked about hierarchy and when it was appropriate to ignore it. Pruitt, who had given this briefing to 11 other Federation personnel in various diplomatic contexts, had never been asked that question before. She answered it honestly. Then she added an extra 2 hours to the briefing. By the time Cole boarded the transport, he had memorized 40 Velthari formal phrases, understood the basic structure of Imperial Court protocol, and had a working knowledge of why the decree itself was politically explosive inside the Empire. He had also been issued a diplomatic uniform that fit him approximately correctly, and a comm unit that could translate Vialthari speech in near real time. The transport crossed the neutral zone at midnight. On the Velthari side, the 3 intelligence officers logged its passage and sent a single encrypted message back to the Imperial capital. The message said, "The human is in transit." Lyra received it in her private study. She read it once. She set it aside. She picked up a second report that had come in the same hour from Chancellor Drev, which was a detailed and very agitated summary of the responses from the 4 noble houses. House Vane had issued a formal protest. House Mir had called an emergency session. House Altek had sent a personal message to the Emperor that Lyra had not been meant to see, but had anyway. It called her decision reckless. She agreed with that word. She disagreed with the implication that reckless was the same as wrong. The human transport was going to arrive in 48 hours. The Empire had been careful for 9,000 years. She was about to show it something careful had never been able to build. The Imperial Station at Kalevra was the first Valthari structure Cole had ever stood inside, and it was designed to make a person feel small on purpose. He stood in the receiving bay, diplomatic uniform pressed, paper notebook in his chest pocket, and looked up at ceilings that were 40 feet high and carved from a single piece of something that was not quite stone and not quite metal, and caught light the way the surface of deep water does. The Valthari officials who met him were tall, gray-skinned, four-fingered, and looking at him the way people look at something they have read extensively about, but were not entirely prepared to see in person. He looked back at them the same way. It seemed fair. The senior official, who introduced himself as Sub-Commander Vel, spoke in Valthari. Cole's earpiece translated. "Welcome to Imperial territory, Lieutenant. You are the first human to enter Imperial space under diplomatic invitation. I appreciate the welcome," Cole said, "and I'll do my best not to be the last." Vel's expression shifted in a way Cole could not fully read yet. He filed it for later. The journey to the Imperial capital took 18 hours on a Valthari courier vessel. Cole spent most of it watching, asking the one translator assigned to him questions about everything he saw, and eating Valthari ration packs that tasted like something between a pine tree and a green apple. He finished 3 of them. The translator watched him do it with an expression that Cole eventually identified as impressed. The Imperial capital was a planet city. The entire surface had been built over, layer upon layer, across thousands of years, so that the oldest parts were at the bottom and the newest at the top, and the whole thing hummed with the weight of everything that had happened on it. Cole stood at the window of his assigned quarters and looked at it in the dark and thought about Albuquerque. The formal audience was the following morning. He was briefed by 3 separate officials on exactly how to stand, what to say, when to bow, and how far. The specific angle at which to hold his shoulders when addressed by a member of the Imperial family, and the difference between a respectful silence and an insolent one. He took notes. The throne room was exactly as large as he had been told it would be, and then somehow larger. The floor was polished black. The walls carried the carved histories of 9,000 years of Valthari rule, and every senior member of the Imperial court was present, which meant roughly 200 beings in formal dress, arranged in very deliberate positions. Cole walked in from the far end of the room and covered the distance in a straight line at a steady pace, because that was what he had been told to do, and also because hesitating at the entrance would have felt wrong in a way he could not fully name. He stopped at the marked position. He gave the formal greeting in Valthari, which he had practiced 47 times. The pronunciation was not perfect. It was close enough. Princess Lyra was at the center of the room. She was taller than he expected, wearing something dark and formal that looked like it had been built around her rather than put on. She was looking at him with an expression that was not welcoming and not hostile, and not anything he had a word for yet. The court was silent. Lyra stepped down from the raised dais, which was not in the protocol he had been briefed on, which meant she had changed the protocol. She stopped 6 feet from him. She was 2 inches taller than he was. She looked at him the way someone looks at a problem they have decided is interesting. "Lieutenant Cole Navarro," she said. "Your Imperial Highness," he said. "I read the Kalos 7 report," she said. 11 hours, 1 comm tower, no backup. The coffee helped. The court behind her made a sound that the translator in his ear identified as uncertain. Lyra's expression changed. It was small, the change. A fraction of something that had been closed, opening a degree. "The noble houses," she said, "believe this is a mistake." "They might be right," said Cole. "I've been wrong before." "So have I," said Lyra. I am betting this is not one of those times. She turned and walked back toward the dais. You have 3 months, she said, not turning around. The court will be watching. I noticed, said Cole. The noble houses watched him. The court watched him. 200 beings in formal dress watched a human medic from Albuquerque stand in the middle of the oldest throne room in the outer spiral. Cole stood there and thought, okay. Then he thought, I'm going to need more notebooks. The first month at the Imperial Court was not what Cole had expected, and he had expected very little, which was a technique that had served him well. He woke before the Imperial household each morning. He ran, because he ran every morning and did not see a reason to stop. The station's lower corridors at dawn were empty, except for maintenance workers, a class of beings the court's upper levels largely ignored. Cole learned their names inside a week. The workers, who were not vile Thari, but a shorter gray-green species called the Orcs, had never had a court guest speak to them directly before. By the end of the second week, one of them had started leaving a cup of something hot outside his door each morning. It was not coffee. It was close enough. He attended every formal event he was invited to, which was all of them. He made the protocol errors that were expected of him and corrected them without embarrassment, which was not expected. He sat through 5-hour council sessions in Valthari that he followed at about 60% comprehension, and asked no questions he had not already thought through twice. He read constantly everything he could get the translator to help him access. History, court records, the public accounts of the 4 noble houses, the structure of Valthari military command, the philosophical texts that underpinned imperial governance. Dr. Pruitt, had she been watching, would have added several more hours to the briefing. Princess Lyra observed all of it from a distance that was careful and deliberate. They spoke in formal settings, at arranged meetings, in the presence of the court. She asked him questions that were not on any protocol list. She asked what he thought of the council session he had attended on trade route security. She asked what the hardest decision he had ever made in the field was. She asked, once, what he found most different about the Empire compared to what he had expected. He said, the weight of it. 9,000 years of decisions, all of them still present in the walls. At home, we knock things down and build new ones. Here, everything that was built is still here. Does that seem strange to you? She asked. It seems like something I'd want to understand before I had an opinion about it, he said. That answer reached Chancellor Drev by the end of the day, as everything reached Drev. The Chancellor was not pleased. He had been not pleased for most of the month and was developing a comprehensive list of formal objections to present to the Emperor. The list was 14 pages long and growing. House Vayan sent a representative to the capital in the 3rd week. The representative's name was Lord Calm, and he was the kind of person who had been important for so long that he had stopped noticing whether the people around him were listening. He met Cole at a formal reception and spent 12 minutes explaining why the decree was a violation of tradition, a diplomatic risk, and an insult to the noble bloodlines. He did this in Valthari, slowly, as though Cole might not follow. Cole followed every word. When Calm finished, Cole said in Valthari, I understand your concern. You have built something remarkable over 9,000 years, and you want to protect it. I would feel the same way. He paused. I am also not going anywhere. Khan stared at him. Cole held the stare without blinking, which was something he had practiced at Kilo 7 for 11 very long hours, and left Khan standing alone at the reception table. Lyra had been on the other side of the room. She had not appeared to be watching. She had been watching, that evening, for the first time. She met him without the formality of an arranged setting. She walked into the corridor where he had been reading near a large observation window, and she sat down on the bench across from him with the ease of someone who had decided a specific protocol no longer applied. Khan will file a formal complaint, she said. I know, said Cole. You were not afraid of him. I've been not afraid of things much larger than Caen. He looked up from his book. No offense to Caen. He would be very offended by that. Yes, said Cole, I know. Lyra was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, the city planet glowed in its layers. Old light at the bottom and new light at the top. Why did you agree to come? She said. The real reason. Cole closed the book. Because 41 years ago, we met a civilization that was 9,000 years older than anything we'd ever built. And the first thing we did was step back and decide we weren't ready for the conversation. I don't think that was right. Lyra looked at him steadily. I have been watching your species for 6 years, she said. I know, said Cole. 3 reports. The Kilo 7-1, the Oran Fringe incident, and the flare launcher. She had not told him that. Your Federation's diplomatic office briefed you thoroughly, she said. They told me about the Kelos 7 report. I figured out the other 2 from context. The city glowed below them. The Council believes I have made an error, said Lyra. Do you? Said Cole. She did not answer immediately. I believe, she said, that 9,000 years of careful decisions have produced an empire that is very good at protecting what it has, and very poor at understanding what it is missing. And what is it missing? Said Cole. I am still deciding, said Lyra. That is what these 3 months are for. She stood. The formality came back on like a light. Tomorrow, she said, the Council has a session on the southern frontier conflict. I would like your assessment afterward. I'll be there, said Cole. She left. Cole sat at the window and looked at 9,000 years of layered light and thought about a single human medic. 11 hours, no backup. He picked up his notebook. He wrote, "They are not missing what they think they are missing." He underlined it. Then he wrote, "Neither are we." The southern frontier conflict was 3 systems deep and had been grinding for 6 years. It involved 2 border species, a disputed resource corridor, and a Valthari treaty commitment that had made sense when signed and had since become a slow bleed of ships and personnel and diplomatic capital. Cole read the full briefing the night before the session. Then he read it again. Then he pulled every public record he could access on the 2 border species and the resource corridor and the original treaty, and read those too. The council session lasted 6 hours. He sat in the observation gallery above the chamber floor and watched 14 senior officials argue about a problem they had been arguing about for 6 years. He watched the way they argued, which was structured and formal and very good at protecting the positions already held, and not very good at finding new ones. He took 17 pages of notes. Afterward, Lyra met him in a small side room off the main corridor, with 2 of her advisors present and a translation officer. "Your assessment," she said. Cole opened the notebook. The treaty committed the Empire to protecting the corridor. But the corridor's value was based on mining output projections from 30 years ago. Those projections were wrong. The actual output is 40% lower. He looked up. The Empire is bleeding resources to protect something that is worth less than what it is costing to protect it. The advisors looked at each other. "The Council has discussed the treaty's terms extensively," said the senior advisor, a woman named Commander Thel, carefully. "They've discussed the terms," said Cole. "I didn't hear anyone discuss what happens if you propose a renegotiation to both parties simultaneously and offer them joint administration of the corridor instead. Neither of them wants imperial military presence. They want the resource. Give them a joint framework and the Empire steps out of a 6-year bleed in 60 days. Thel opened her mouth, closed it. "The border species would never agree to joint administration," said the second advisor. "Their conflict is generational." "It's generational because it's been a competition," said Cole. "Change the structure from competition to joint ownership and the incentive shifts. They both want the other to fail. They both want the resource more. Lyra was watching him with the particular quality of attention she had been building across 4 weeks of observing. "You have been here 4 weeks," said Thel. "I know," said Cole. "I might be completely wrong. I'm not a diplomat." "What are you?" said Thel. "A medic. We're trained to triage. Stop the bleeding first. Fix the damage after." He closed the notebook. "You have been treating this like a wound that needs to be managed. It looks to me like one that can be closed." The room was quiet. Lyra said, "I want a full analysis, formal document, presented to me before the next council session." Cole looked at her. "I'll need full access to the treaty records. You will have it." Thel said nothing, which in court terms was louder than protest. Cole delivered the analysis 4 days later. It was 22 pages, written in plain language, every assumption labeled as assumption, every recommendation with a stated risk. Lyra read it in 2 hours. She had Thel read it. She had 3 independent advisors review it. None of them said it was wrong. The council session where she introduced the renegotiation proposal was the most contentious in 3 years. Chancellor Drev argued against it for 40 minutes. House Vane's representative called it naive. House Mir sent a formal letter of concern. 6 weeks later, both border species accepted the joint administration framework. The southern frontier conflict ended without a battle. The Empire's Eastern news services reported it as a diplomatic achievement by the Imperial Court. They did not name Cole Navarro. He did not expect them to. What he did not expect was what happened the evening the agreement was signed. Lyra came to the observation window corridor again, without the formality, without advisors. She sat across from him, the city glowing below. She did not say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "The court does not know what to do with you." "That makes 2 of us," said Cole. "The noble houses are preparing a formal challenge to the decree. They will argue before my father that a human cannot be integrated into imperial succession." "Can they win that argument?" Cole said. "They can make it very complicated," said Lyra. "My father has not spoken publicly. He is watching." Cole looked at the notebook in his hands. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to keep being what you are," said Lyra. "The court is watching for a mistake. They are expecting one. They have spent 9,000 years being disappointed by the predictable. I'll try to stay unpredictable." "You do not try," said Lyra. "That is the difference." It was the first time she had said something that was not a question or a direction. Cole looked at her. She was looking out at the city. "Your Highness," he said. "Yes. You decided on this before you ever knew my name." Lyra was quiet for a moment. "I decided the direction." The specific name came from a field report about a man who held a line for 11 hours with a comm tower and no backup, and afterward asked for coffee. "The coffee question was genuine," said Cole. "I really wanted coffee." The corner of her mouth moved in a way that was very small and entirely real. "I know," she said. The city glowed below them. The challenge from the noble houses was coming. The Emperor was watching. 200 beings in formal dress were waiting for a mistake. Cole had held a line for 11 hours once before. He opened his notebook. He had 3 months minus the time already spent. He intended to use all of it. The formal challenge came on a day when the sky over the capital was the color of iron. Lord Khan arrived at the palace with a legal delegation and a document 40 pages long that argued, on the basis of 6 specific articles in the Imperial Constitution, that the decree violated succession law, diplomatic precedent, and the fundamental principles of Valthari governance. It was a thorough document. It had been prepared by the best legal minds in House Vian, and it was designed not to fail. Cole heard about it the same morning, from one of the Oreth maintenance workers who had taken to passing information in the way that people who are considered invisible always pass information. Quietly, accurately, and completely. He spent the day reading imperial constitutional law. By evening, he had read 240 years of legal precedent, 3 major succession disputes, and the specific articles cited in Khan's challenge. He had also found something the legal team of House Vayan had either missed or chosen not to cite. Article 17 of the Founding Constitution, Section 4, Paragraph 2. In matters of sovereign selection by an heir of majority age, the throne holds final interpretive authority over succession eligibility, provided the selection serves the demonstrable interests of the empire. Demonstrable interests of the empire. Cole wrote that phrase down and underlined it 3 times. The formal hearing was scheduled for 11 days later, before the imperial court with the emperor presiding. It would be the first time Cole would stand before Emperor Varek of the Valthari Empire. He used the 11 days. He compiled a documented record of every measurable impact of his presence at court. The Southern Frontier Resolution. The 2 smaller border disputes he had quietly provided analysis on at Lyra's request. The cultural exchange proposals he had drafted that were still in committee but moving. The relationships he had built with the Orcs workers, who, it turned out, had direct lines to 11 different departments of the palace that the court's upper levels did not formally manage. He documented it in Valthari. He had 3 translators check it. It was 31 pages. On the day of the hearing, the throne room was full. Every noble house had sent representatives. The diplomatic corps was present. The senior military commanders were present. The press offices of 6 different news services had been given gallery access. Lord Khan presented his case for 90 minutes. It was precise, thorough, and built on a foundation of 9,000 years of precedent. When it was finished, the emperor looked to the center of the room. "Lieutenant Navarro," said Emperor Varek. His voice was lower than Lyra's and carried the quality of something that had been used to settle very large questions for a very long time. "You may speak." Cole stepped forward. He had the 31-page document in one hand and the paper notebook in the other. He put the notebook away. He did not look at the notebook. "Your Imperial Majesty," he said. "Honored court. I am not going to argue against Lord Khan's precedents. They are accurate. They are well researched. The articles he cited are real and their history is real." The court was very quiet. "I want to speak instead about Article 17, Section 4, Paragraph 2. Demonstrable interests of the empire." He held up the document. "In my time at this court, with the access provided by the princess's decree, the southern frontier conflict has been resolved without military engagement. 2 additional border disputes have entered mediation using frameworks developed during my analysis work. A cultural exchange proposal is in committee that would open direct civilian contact between the Federation and the Empire for the first time in 41 years. He paused. "These are demonstrable. They are documented. And they happened not despite my being human, but because I am human. Because I come from a species that has learned, in 40 years, to solve problems in ways that 9,000 years of precedent has not needed to consider." He set the document on the floor in front of him. "The Valthari way of presenting formal evidence. I am not here to replace what the Empire has built," he said. "I am here because the Empire is large enough, old enough, and strong enough to add something it does not yet have." The room was silent. Emperor Varek looked at the document on the floor. He looked at Cole. He looked at his daughter, who was standing at his right hand, expressionless and absolutely still. "The challenge is noted," said the emperor. "The court will recess for consideration." It was not a ruling. It was not a dismissal. Lord Khan's expression said he had expected a ruling. The recess lasted 2 days. Cole did not sleep much. He ran in the early mornings, and the Orcs worker left coffee outside his door. Real coffee, which he had obtained through a supply chain Cole did not ask about and would not have been able to trace. He drank it at the observation window. The second morning, Lyra came to the window again. It was before dawn. She was not in formal dress. "My father is not an easy man to move," she said. "I know," said Cole. "He has ruled for 60 years. He has seen 11 succession challenges, 4 constitutional crises, and 2 wars. And he's watching to see if I break," said Cole. "He is watching to see if you are real," said Lyra. "There is a difference." Cole looked out at the city. "And what do you see?" Lyra was quiet for a long moment. "I see," she said carefully, "a man who came to an empire 9,000 years older than his own civilization, learned its language in 6 weeks to a functional degree, resolved a 6-year military situation in 60 days, read 240 years of constitutional law in a single afternoon, and did all of it without once asking whether he was supposed to be here." "I had doubts," said Cole. "I know," said Lyra. "I also know what you did with him." The city glowed below. Cole looked at her. She was looking at the light. "Whatever your father decides," he said, "I want you to know the 3 months were worth it." Lyra turned to look at him. It was the first time, in all of the watching and the meetings and the formal sessions and the window conversations, that she looked at him without the specific weight of assessment. She looked at him the way a person looks at something they have already decided about. "And the 3 months are not over," she said. The hearing reconvened the following morning. Emperor Varek took his position on the dais. The court assembled. Lord Khan stood with his delegation, his 40-page document, his 9,000 years of precedent. Cole stood in the center of the floor with a 31-page evidence document at his feet and a paper notebook in his chest pocket. The Emperor spoke. "The challenge presented by House Vian is legally valid," he said. "The precedents cited are accurate and the constitutional references are sound." He paused. "They are also insufficient." The court made a sound. Article 17 permits sovereign selection at the heir's discretion when demonstrable imperial interest is served. The evidence presented by the candidate demonstrates that interest conclusively. The Emperor looked at Lord Khan with the particular quality of a man who has made decisions that ended things. "The challenge is denied." Lord Khan went very still. "The decree stands," said the Emperor. "The court is dismissed." He looked at Cole for a moment before he turned. It was a brief look. It held the same quality as the assessment Lyra had been running for 3 months, but compressed. A 60-year ruler's version of it. Cole held the look. The Emperor turned. The court began to move. Lyra came down from the dais and stood in the center of the floor, 3 feet from Cole. The room was emptying around them. "The 3 months are not over," she said again. "No," said Cole. "There is still much the court will resist." "I know. And the noble houses will not stop because of one ruling." "I know that too." Lyra looked at him. The last of the formal court was filing out. The throne room was almost empty. "Why are you not afraid?" she said. Cole thought about Kalos 7. 11 hours, 1 tower, no backup. The question at the end. "Because being afraid of something I can't control is a waste of the time I have to work with," he said. Lyra was quiet. Then she said, "My mother used to say that an empire survives by knowing when to hold and when to move." "What happened to your mother?" said Cole. "She held when she should have moved," said Lyra. "I intend to learn from that." It was the smallest thing she had told him about herself. It sat in the air between them the way loaded words do. Cole did not ask for more. "And the 3 months," he said. "Yes," said Lyra. "I'll be here." She turned and walked toward the corridor, unhurried, carrying 9,000 years of history on her shoulders the way she always did. Like something she had decided to bear rather than something that was bearing her. Cole looked at the empty throne room, at the carved walls and the polished floor and the 9,000 years of decisions present in every stone. He picked up the 31-page document from the floor. He had work to do. And somewhere in the empire, in the newsrooms and the noble houses and the diplomatic offices and the border stations. The word was moving. The challenge had been denied. The decree stood. The human was staying. Cole Navarro put the document under his arm and walked out of the oldest throne room in the outer spiral with the same stride he had walked in with. Behind him, the door closed. Ahead of him, 3 months became the rest of everything. The Empire, 9,000 years old, turned toward something it had never faced before, a future that had not been decided yet, and a human medic from Albuquerque who had decided, 11 hours into an impossible night, that the thing to do was hold the line. He was still holding it.